Senate will come to order. Please stand for the prayer. Today's chaplain is our Senate chaplain, Pastor Mike Smith from Redeeming Love Church in Maplewood. And following the prayer, please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Before I pray, I want to say how thankful I am for all of you. You know, in these past years, I've seen your continual service and sacrifice, and I've often told as many as I can about how thankful I am to be a Minnesotan. I've seen you in times where there's been barrage of criticism from all angles. I've seen you with challenges that have been great. I've seen you in times when it seems that those challenges have been overwhelming. I've also seen you in times where emotions of frustration, tension, fueled by the pressure of the moment, have come up. But I've also seen you together in the times when Minnesota was hurting, that your anger has given way to patience, forgiveness has been extended towards failure. I've seen you where in those times of misunderstanding, you've endeavored to understand. And I've seen those deep differences dwindle into common compassion. In times when our state has been shaken, when people have been grieving, I've seen you reach across the aisle after the times that have been difficult, and you've reached out to each other. And I just want to say to you how thankful I am for all of you as an observer. At the end of the day, I've seen you care for each other and walk out of this place with dignity and honor. Having said that, I know that I'm extending your day, forgive me, but I want to extend this as a blessing to all of you because of just my heart feeling for every one of you in this place. These are words that were written not in a church, not in a religious gathering, not in a temple, but they were written on a hillside by a young boy that was watching some sheep. I often remind myself of these words in prayer. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. I pray that for you. He leads me in paths that are right for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear because I know that you are with me. Your rod and staff comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in your presence forever. Lord, that is my prayer, my blessing over this gathering today, that in this moment, in the decisions of this day and into the future, may they know that you are with us and that your goodness and mercy follow us. So, Lord, I say bless this gathering of leaders who have servants' hearts. Bless this house. And then when they go to their own house, may you bless that house. And I pray that they would know your joy that gives them strength. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Cal. I know.
Secretary will take the roll.
Senators Abler, Anderson, Bach, Benson, Bigham, Carlson, Chamberlain, Champion, Clausen, Coleman, Swazinski, Dames, Dibble, Dornick, Draheim, Duckworth, Dietzick, Eaton, Eichhorn, Eakin, Fate, Franzen, Frenz, Gazelka, Goggin, Herr, Hoffman, Housley, Howe, Ingebrigtsen, Isaacson, Jasinski, Johnson, Johnson, Stewart, Kent, Kiffmeyer, Klein, Karan, Kunish, Lang, Latz, Limmer, Marty, Matthews, McEwen, Miller, Murphy, Nelson, Newman, Newton, Osmic, Pappas, Port, Pratt, Putnam, Rarick, Rest, Rosen, Rude, Senjum, Tomasoni, Torres, Ray, Utke, Weber, Westrom, Uyghur, Wickland.
Pursuant to Rule 14.1, the following members intend to vote under Rule 40.7. Senators Carlson, Champion, Coleman, Eaton, Goggin, Isaacson, Latz, Newman, Newton, Senjum, and Torres Ray. A quorum is present. Members will begin with the 8th order of business, introduction and first reading of Senate files listed in today's introduction calendar. Our Senate file numbers 2560 to 2566. These Senate files are given their first reading and referred as indicated. Next, we'll move to the 9th order of business, motions and resolutions. We have an author's motion to be read by the Secretary.
Senator Newton moves that the name of Senator McEwen be added as co-author of Senate File 2522.
On the motion, on the author's motion read by the Secretary, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we'll take up the Conference Committee report on Senate File 958. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President. Mr. President, members, we've got the Ag Policy Conference report to adopt. No budgetary or monetary items in this, but some key policy provisions that
Senator
we found.
Westrom, before you get in the explanation of the bill, Senator Westrom moves that the foregoing recommendations on Conference Committee report, Senate File 958, now be adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee. To that motion, Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, this is the Ag Policy Conference report only. No monetary issues in here, but policy issues, members, and agriculture maybe is appropriately going first because we found some agreement on areas between the House and the Senate, and maybe the underlying reason is we find agreement on agriculture as we all like to eat, members. Members, I'll just run through the brief changes on the agriculture policy bill. Some provisions from the Senate and from the House that we've agreed upon or come to workable language.
Hold on, Senator Westrom. Members, it's getting a little loud in the chamber. Please take your conversations outside the chamber so we can hear Senator Westrom explain the Conference Committee report on Senate File 958. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, members, I'll touch on some of the bigger key items and then a few of the smaller ones, but not a big bill overall, but some significant agreement and changes. In the cottage food industry, that's something that many members, legislators have supported, a balanced approach. Senator Matthews brought the bill forward in the Senate, Representative Vang in the House. The few changes, notable changes in this language from when it left the House is the inflator after 5 years on the second tier and the first tier are not in there. It's just a one-time increase on the second tier to $78,000. First tier will go up next January, one time for inflationary index, but none thereafter. The tier one is currently at $5,000. We would anticipate that to maybe go up to about $7,000 to $7,500, depending upon the Department of Ag will do that by January of next year. Tier 2 goes from $18,000 to $78,000. Members, we open up in the cottage food industry, small businesses that are incubating, whether it's a part-time job or a new endeavor, they would be, for the first time, able to adopt or use an LLC as their small business. We've prohibited that in the past. Advocates and those in the industry would like this. Some of them would choose to use that. We expanded to pet treats. That's a provision that was in the Senate, the House agreed to. And members, these are some small but significant changes to help advance and keep the cottage food industry very healthy and strong and growing and vibrant in our state. We've heard support from the urban areas, the suburban areas, with people that like to take small farm or truck operations and turn those things into value-added products. Rural members as well that take their gardens or their small farming produce and turn it into other value-added products, whether it's jams, whether it's canning pickles, whether it's cupcakes, whether it's decorating cakes. There's great entrepreneurial opportunities with this cottage food industry, and let them grow into bigger businesses in our state. And that was the effort by Senator Matthews and others. We've got agreement on that. Wild game processing, known as the garage guys, we've got a compromise with the House and the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Before 2 years ago, the garage guys were able to clean out deer, debone the meat, take the fur off deer or wild game, kind of the unpleasant side of hunting sometimes. Some guys really thrive and some guys are really good at this. They do it part-time, they do it out of their garage or their shop, or part-time in the fall when it's hunting season throughout Minnesota, which is a real staple heritage in our state. What this does is allows a $20,000 annual limit for wild game processing, or up to 200 deer. We worked with the Rural Counties Association and the garage guys, so to speak. We also, the House had registration in theirs. This has voluntary registration in it, but it's not required, but it is encouraged through the Department of Ag, no fee, no cost. It also has chronic wasting disposal concerns addressed, that those same people participating would have to dispose of deer carcasses in a CWD endemic zone the same as any hunter would. And so that's set by the DNR, but that's the way hunters have to dispose of them as well. So we've come to agreement on that. That's a significant agreement and exemption to keep garage guys that do this very part-time, very sideline type business, but it's really more of a service than even a business. Good for hunters, good for those that maybe might travel up north to hunt, but don't want to get into that messy part of hunting. We also have significant agreement on a couple chronic wasting disease, the travel or the transport of a deer. The Senate had a bill that didn't allow a 15-mile endemic zone to put in place for deer farmers that weren't tested with chronic wasting disease. Just because a deer was found in the wild, they were all of a sudden not able to move their animals. What we came to agreement with the House on that is we would keep the 15-mile ban in place, members, but we put language in there to not allow that once there's a live test. And we've supported that before financially. The U of M is out with promising information and promising results of coming up with a live test. We're not there yet, but this language encourages that, helps put the pressure on keeping us moving in that direction. And when we get to that point of a live test, they wouldn't be able to restrict movement in the 15-mile radius. As a part of that agreement, we also came to agreement on the Board of Animal Health, allowing a sixth member of, currently the makeup is 3 livestock farmers and 2 veterinarians. This would allow a sixth member of the board, a fourth livestock producer from the tribal reservations across Minnesota. They came to us with concern about being able to be on the board and especially focus on CWD concerns with about 20% of the land mass in the state. We found agreement with the House on this. This was their language to begin with, but we do limit it to a livestock producer members, and so that gave many concerned about this adequate comfort. Another few other provisions, members, and then I'll stand for questions. Mr. President, Senator Murphy was a member of our conference committee and our Ag committee. We had language dealing with the sanitation exemption for COVID-19 sanitation that we had exempted last year temporarily for a year till April 1st. We came to agreement to exempt that permanently pertaining to COVID-19, retaining some license for the HVAC systems and more commercial systems, but exempting all the smaller off-the-shelf sanitizers focused on COVID-19 sanitation. So that was an agreement we found with the House and Senator Murphy, and ultimately it was her bill that we adopted. We had language for adding forestry provisions to the RFA, just a technical change if there's a need for that with poplar trees. It could be an RFA eligible loan arrangement. Used to have this in language. It was dropped out 5-10 years ago, and we bring it back here in this bill as well. A couple other significant parts, members. The farmer lender mediation. There was an extension of 5 years in the House bill, which we agreed to. The House also had tried to change the provisions of farmer lender mediation, adding a 30-day extension to the mediation period. We accepted the 5-year extension, did not do any changes to the additional days. Currently, it's a 90-day mediation period that's been in state law since the 80s, the farm crisis back then. We did agree to the extension in this bill. And so, members, another piece, we've also clarified that EMT using a dog or on site where a trained dog, a rescue dog, or a trained dog of some sort would get injured, and there may not be a veterinarian around, and they need to do some emergency Good Samaritan type procedures on the dog to save its life. Senator Matthews brought this bill forward. The House was supportive of that. We allow that common sense provision to make the change in here to save the dog's life or help rescue a dog that might be injured in an accident or an emergency type situation. And so with that, members, bio-incentives, one other thing we do restrict agree to in future funding, restricting the dollars from being able to be paid with lobbyists. That was a House provision that we did agree to in the final compromise. And so with that, members, I stand for questions. That's a kind of a rough or quick run through of the key provisions. There's a few other small ones, but I'll spare the body going through those details.
All right, members, we're on the Westrom motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate File 958. Further discussion, Senator Murphy.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. I do want to make sure and thank particularly Senator Westrom, Representative Sundin, the members of the conference committee, and the staff, both partisan and nonpartisan, who worked to come to this compromise policy bill that we're debating today. It is a compromise in the best definition of that word. There are issues that matter to the people of Minnesota, and between the members of the House and the Senate and the chairs, Westrom and Sundin, what you have before you is an earnest and honest compromise that I think solves a few problems for the people of Minnesota. And Senator Westrom, I'm really grateful for that. I thank you for that. And I've enjoyed our time together, even though we haven't really been able to be together. I've enjoyed it, and I thank you. For the members of our caucus, I know we talked about this last night, and I hope that you will review the language and support this proposal today with your vote. I think it's important for Minnesotans and for our future. We talked, when we last talked about agriculture, about broadband, and that issue is not yet resolved, and it's not in this bill. But it is an important issue for the people of Minnesota, and like many of you, I have looked over the handout or the email that we got about the negotiated agreement among the leadership and the governor, and I see that there is money earmarked in that for broadband, $70 million. When we have talked in the past about what we need to meet our 2022 goal on border-to-border broadband, it is $120 million. And so, Senator Westrom and members, I'm going to continue to work with you, especially you, Senator Westrom, to get that number of $70 million to $120 million so we can finish our commitment to that work and say to Minnesotans, looking them straight in the eye, we know that this is important to you, we agree, and we're going to take care of it. So there's work left to do. I know that's true when I think about the 2 pages of handwritten notes about the budget agreement, about the targets. I can see in front of us a tremendous amount of work. So I do want to say on the Ag bill, Thank you for showing Minnesotans that it is possible to compromise. And then I want to say, I'm going to say a couple of things that you might not like so much. I remember going to the Freedom to Breathe Conference Committee bill signing with then Governor Pawlenty. I served on that conference committee. It was my very first one. And he'd organized the press conference about the bill signing, not really wanting the Democrats there. And we found out about it, and we went because we were really proud of the work. And we showed up, and he was gracious, as he always was, and said, "I'm glad you're here." And then we did the press conference, and then he said to everybody there, and we were outside in Eagan, he said, "I'm going to say a few things now that you might not like, DFLers, so if you want to go, you should go." That was a good cue for us to take off before he lit into us and the work that we hadn't been doing from his perspective. So, to the budget targets that were reached early this morning. I see those 2 sheets of paper and recognize all the work that is in front of us. I will come back to agriculture. I promise you, Mr. President, I will come back to agriculture. When I look at the agreement on paper, what I see is a lot of work in front of us, this body in the House, to finish up the work that we came here to do for the people of Minnesota. I asked to be on the Ag Committee because there is so much important work to do for that part of our economy and for people who live in rural places. I ran for office because I believe deeply in this institution. This one right here, and our ability to improve people's lives using the very, very hard work of 201 people trying to make decisions together. This morning I woke up and we learned that the leaders have reached budget targets. Hallelujah. It's the very last day of this legislature. Should have happened a long time ago. And all I can see in front of us is that there is a lot of work
Senator
left
Pratt,
to
for
do.
what reason do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just wondering what the question under debate is. We seem to be talking about the financial deal that was struck, and I believe under 36.2. The question in front of the body is the policy committee report.
Members, the question before the body is the adoption of the conference committee report. Senator Murphy said she's going to bring it back, so I'm going to give her an opportunity to bring it back to the conference committee report. But we are on the Westrom motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate File 958. Senator Murphy.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It is true, I am speaking, and I will bring it back. But we are here for the people of Minnesota, and it's important while I have the floor to be able to talk to the people of Minnesota about what we're going to accomplish today on this very last day of this legislative session. When I think about the last 2 years and what we've experienced here in Minnesota, it's been nothing but challenging between COVID and civil unrest, and the murder of a person under the knee of a law enforcement officer, a trial, a verdict. It has been a hard year.
Bring it back.
Yes, Mr. President. In this chamber, we are here to do the work of the people. And in the earliest part of this year, and for 4 months now.
Mr. President?
Mr. President, point of parliamentary inquiry.
Senator Kiffmeyer, for what reason do you rise?
Mr. President, I rise for the purpose of what is the agenda item that is before the body today that we are supposed to be discussing.
Members, as I said, the motion on the floor is the adoption of the committee report on Senate File 958. If a member wants to rise, they should rise to raise a point of order and specify the point of order that they are raising. Senator Murphy.
Mr. President.
To the adoption of the committee report on Senate File 958. Senator Dibble, for what reason do you rise?
Point of order, point of information.
Please
on
state
the previous...
your point of order.
So, Mr. President, Senator Murphy is speaking to a conference
Senator
committee
Dibble,
report.
do you have a point of order
and
to
what
raise?
is, I don't know what the point of order is, but the point is her comments are being interrupted.
Senator Murphy.
She is speaking to issues that are not in a conference committee report while she's talking about the adoption of the conference committee report. So the Republican members would be advised to stop interrupting Senator
Dibble.
Murphy's arguments.
Members,
Thank you.
I'm going to just a quick reminder. if you are going to stand to raise a point of order, Mr. President, I stand to raise a point of order, and then you state your point of order, either the rules of the Senate or if you have something in Mason's that you want to point out. But the proper way to do it is, Mr. President, I'd like to stand to raise a point of order, and then you state your point of order. Okay? Senator Dibble, you just mentioned a reason why Senator Murphy could be called out of order, because she is not talking about the items that are in the adoption of the conference committee report.
Mr. President?
We are on the adoption of the conference committee report on Senate File 958. Senator Kent, for what reason do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a point of order regarding
state your point of order.
Mason, Section 80, purpose of debate. If I may, the purpose of legislative bodies is to reach their best joint judgment on the questions presented to them for decision. The decision is the decision of the group, not of the individual members. To reach that joint judgment of the body, the exchange of thought and the reasons of members are essential. That exchange of thought is through debate. Every member has the right to present his thoughts and opinions and to argue and attempt to convince the other members of this group. Debate is one of the most fundamental characteristics of a legislative body. That's what it says in Mason's, and I would just add, this is our last day addressing these very important issues. I appreciate, Mr. President, that you acknowledge that Senator Murphy should have some leeway in this. I hope we will all have some leeway, and it is really not okay for members of the opposing party to keep interrupting for the sake of trying to picket that when we know that this is the purpose of debate. Thank you.
Members, I will remind you, Senator Kent did mention something in Mason's, but a higher ruling in this chamber than Mason's is our Senate rules. Senate Rule 36.2 says the member shall speak only to the question under debate and avoid personality. The question under debate is the adoption of the conference committee report on Senate File 958. That is the question before the body, and the debate in the body will be limited to that question before the body. So to the adoption of the conference committee report on Senate File 958, Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Senate File 958 is an incomplete piece of work. Senate File 958 does not include adequate funding for border-to-border broadband, because today is the day that legislative leadership and the governor decided to set targets. Senate File 958 is the product of 4 months of work, and it is incomplete for the people of Minnesota. And while this bill was being debated over the last 4 months, precious time in this chamber was dedicated to issues like vouchers for schools. We're picking on trans children and on voter suppression, issues that will likely not become law, but will very likely become the fodder for the next political campaign that happens when we finish our work. Senate File 958, which I urge you to adopt, is incomplete because on the very last day of this session, this morning delivered to us incomplete budget targets with weeks or months of work left to do. I ran here because I believe this chamber is the place where we together can improve people's lives. Senate File 958, while a very, very fine piece of work, is incomplete. And as we work our way through this last day, which we must be done at midnight, we will debate other incomplete pieces of policy work, but we will not have yet answered the question for people in terms of secure housing, adequate food, transportation. We will not have solved for the essential frontline workers who made Minnesota work through the course of the global pandemic. We will have not answered for infrastructure, for water infrastructure, for rebuilding communities destroyed in civil unrest. We will have not answered the question about jobs. Senate File 958 is the artful work of two bodies coming together to compromise, and I applaud that. But it is inadequate to the charge, and our work in this body today is inadequate when we think about the tremendous needs, the suffering, the struggle that Minnesotans have experienced in the last 2 years. Too much time in this body has been spent getting ready for the next election, and not enough time has been spent in this chamber to improve the lives of Minnesotans. And I love politics, I do, but only the kind that is muscular in pursuit of Minnesota's future. And while I support and urge your vote for Senate File 958, the work for this body and for Minnesotans is very incomplete today. And with that, I say thank you.
Members, just a reminder, we're on the adoption, the Westrom motion to adopt the Conference Committee report on Senate File 958. Further discussion, I have Senator Dibble, followed by Senator Rosen. Senator Dibble. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring this conversation and this debate back to the bill. I'd like to talk about the $70 million that is being proposed, appropriated for broadband. I stood up when this bill was when broadband was first being discussed, because I take a very strong interest in this area, as many of you do. I think I have probably one of the most telcos per district in the state. Would Senator Murphy please yield for a question?
Senator Murphy will yield. Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Murphy, when we had this previous discussion on the floor, you talked about your discussions with the commissioner, perhaps Commissioner of Revenue, Commissioner of Deed. I talked about my conversations with my small telcos and the Office of Broadband. Senator Murphy, did you ever reach out to the Office of Broadband?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and Senator Rosen, yes.
Senator Rosen.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Murphy, perhaps they changed their discussion with me, and I know that $120 million was being proposed by many in this chamber and the House, but my conversations with the Office of Broadband revealed that that was too much money, that the Office of Broadband, what they would like and what the small telcos would like is 35 per year, because there is applications by the municipalities, by the cities, and they have to get it right. So the only amount that the industry can basically put it shovel ready into the ground is between 30 to 35 million. Senator Murphy, this was a great compromise in the governor's chambers last night. We should be very proud of this $70 million. It's going to serve the entire state well. And I'm basically disheartened that there has been a damper put on this proposal, because this is the great equalizer, is broadband across the state. But it doesn't make sense to throw money at something where the industry and the network can't take anymore. There are shortages of supply. They can only do so much, and you have to have the application process. So members, let's all revel in this great accomplishment that we do band with broadband, not criticizing that we didn't do more.
Further discussion on the adoption of the Conference Committee report. Members, just a reminder, this is a two-step process. So first we'll take a vote to adopt the Conference Committee report, and then at that time the bill, the Conference Committee report, will become a bill once the Secretary gives it its third reading, and then we'll take a final vote on the overall bill. So Senator Westrom renews his motion that the foregoing recommendations and Conference Committee report on Senate File 958 now be adopted. and that the bill be repassed as amended by the conference committee. So on the Westrom motion to adopt the conference committee report, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The conference committee report is adopted. The secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File Number 958, a bill for an act relating to agriculture.
Third reading. Any final discussion on Senate File 958? Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, as long as there's no other people that want to testify or talk on it, members, I just wanted to rise briefly, thank our staff and our conferees. We worked over the weekend to come together with this agreement to move forward what we could find good agreement on. The members of our staff worked unbelievably hard. I don't know how many nights in the past week I was on the phone at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, talking through issues with staff, talking with Rep. Sundin. The conferees were made themselves available as we needed, Saturday afternoon, even Sunday for about an hour. And so, Mr. President, members, let's take this time to just remember and recognize the value of our staff, our committee legislative assistant, our CA, our research, the partisan research, both sides, Democrat and Republican, and the nonpartisan research, House research, and the Senate Council that provide such a capable job for us to help put these things together, sometimes last minute. But members, I just want to thank all of them for their efforts and the conferees for making themselves flexible. Members, I urge your support of this good agreement for agriculture. Remember, we all love to eat. Let's keep agriculture strong and vibrant in our state, open up more opportunities for cottage food industries, make sure the wild game processing can flourish and the garage guys are able to do what they want, work with the Board of Animal Health, keeping CWD in the forefront, but working with the farmers that also need to raise deer. The Board of Animal Health needs to stay focused on livestock across our state as they've done so capable, and this is a good agreement. I urge your green vote on this conference committee report.
Members, we're on final passage of Senate File 958. See no further discussion. The secretary will take the roll. All members in alternate locations, please come to the chamber to vote. Call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Friends.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Friends.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Friends.
And Senator Torres Ray votes aye.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Newman votes aye.
Newman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Chamberlain votes aye.
Chamberlain votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Senjum votes aye.
Senjum votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 0 nays, the bills pass and its title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions will revert to the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has adopted the recommendation and report of the Conference Committee in House File Number 164 and repassed said bill in accordance with the report of the committee so adopted. House File Number 164, a bill for an act relating to energy, is herewith transmitted to the Senate. Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Did he make the motion? Do I need to make the motion, or?
Senator Rarick, I got ahead of the game there. We're gonna do the Conference Committee report on Senate File 193. Senator Benson.
Mr. President.
Senator Benson.
Mr. President, I move that the foregoing recommendations and Conference Committee report on Senate File 193 be now adopted and the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
To that motion, Senator Benson.
Mr. President and members, you remember we've passed SIPAC at least twice, but there were concerns in this body among some of the members and in the House about liability consideration as it relates to the Compact Board. And so to the language as passed by the Senate, we added a separate article dealing with liability concerns so that if the Compact Commission voted to adopt Minnesota's language with the liability protection, it would be included as part of the compact, but if the liability article did not meet compact criteria, then we would be admitted into the compact without that criteria. Members, we believe there is broad agreement, and with the comfort language around liability protections, I hope that we can earn the support of every member in this body.
Discussion on the adoption of the Conference Committee report on Senate File 193. Senator Wickland.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I'd like to rise in support of adopting the Conference Committee report. When I signed on to this bill, it was because I feel that there is an urgent need to address access to mental health care in Minnesota, and by joining the SIPAC Compact, that's one way that we can address needs that are immediate and urgent. People have had to change their location due to COVID, due to work or to take care of parents or so on, and people have moved out of state and would like to continue with providers that they have. And this compact, joining this compact would help us facilitate that. I think that the solution found by the Senator Benson and Representative Morrison, I appreciate their solution because it not only provides a way for examination of the concern that the lawyers had raised about liability concerns, but it also does not prevent us from joining the compact should we find that it is not a way for us to qualify if the language is included. So I really appreciate that the bill allows us to know with certainty that we will be able to join the compact as much as possible when we leave session. So thank you.
Further discussion on the adoption of the committee report, Senator Bingham, followed by Senator Abler. Senator Bingham.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise in support of the conference committee report for Senate File 193. I appreciate the thoroughness of the discussion in civil law and also throughout this process. This is a big deal, members. This really is another tool for folks to have access to mental health services, which we know are in short supply. So I think this is one of those bills that we can hold up as a huge success, and appreciate everybody's help on it throughout the committee process and the conference committee process, because this is exactly how our process is supposed to go, where there's give and take, Mr. President, and we are the only divided legislature, and so there's going to be no perfect bill, and we all know how much Senator Benson loves perfect bills, and that is not invoking personality. That's a compliment. So I really appreciate that we're getting this across the finish line, even if it's on the very last day. Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion, Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not to belabor that we're all happy with the bill, the way it worked out, but it's actually, in a time that we're in, it's just nice to celebrate that we actually can agree on things. And Senator Bingham and I don't always agree on everything. She should agree with me more often, and I should agree with her more often probably. But so as you look at a world that's just so touchy and frightened and challenged, Minnesota, Mr. President, actually does work. Divided government can work. There was some significant differences between the House and the Senate worrying about liability issues, so this bill creates a little side agreement that hopefully can get done. But Mr. President, this is how things go most of the time here, and I just want to encourage people to help the psychologists deal with people across the whole country, not just in Minnesota, and urge a green vote. Thank you.
Senator Benson renews her motion to adopt the conference committee report on Senate File 193. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
Senate File 193, a bill for an act relating to health occupations.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Benson.
Mr. President, COVID has left more people in mental health crisis, but it has also brought us advances in telemedicine. The Psy Compact is the perfect complement to the key lessons that we have learned from our COVID experience. But more important than that, it's a durable change to improve access to psychological services to people who winter in another state or go to college in another state. It enhances professional collaboration, and it supports spouses, particularly of military members who move from state to state but want to continue their practice. And so I appreciate all the support and cooperation in bringing this forward. I look forward to green votes on the board and moving this forward so Minnesota can bring the best of mental health practice to our people.
Members, we're on final passage of the conference committee report for Senate File 193. Seeing no further discussion, the Secretary will take the roll. All members in alternate locations, please come to the chamber to vote. I'll call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Newton votes aye.
That was Senator Eaton.
Senator Eaton votes aye. Members, we're under a roll call vote. I'm having a very hard time hearing Senator Frentz. Please take your conversations outside the chamber. Senator Frentz. Just
Thank
to
you,
repeat,
Mr.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Senator
Frentz.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Torres Ray votes aye.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Newman votes aye.
Newman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Chamberlain votes aye.
Chamberlain votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Senjum votes aye.
Senjum votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
And thank you, Mr. President. Senator Dames votes aye.
Dames votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions will... Before we revert to the third order of business, we have a couple conference committees that are meeting that we need to get excused. Pursuant to Rule 12.5, Senator Dames moves that the following members be excused for a conference committee on Senate File 972 at 1 p.m. Senator Dames, Senjum, Utke, Matthews, and Frentz. Pursuant to Rule 12 on the Dames motion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Pursuant to Rule 12.5, Senator Chamberlain moves that the following members be excused for a conference committee report on House File 1065 at 1 p.m. Senators Chamberlain, Eichhorn, Duckworth, Dornick, and Uyghur. On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions will revert to the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has adopted the recommendation and report of the Conference Committee on House File Number 164 and repassed said bill in accordance with the report of the committee. So adopted. House File Number 164, bill related to energy. House File 164 is herewith transmitted to the Senate. Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe I have a motion for...
Yep, it's time for your motion. Senator Rarick, I apologize. I got ahead of myself. I know how much you want to get this bill across the finish line, so I was just trying to help you out. Senator Rarick, please state your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the foregoing recommendations of the Conference Committee report on House File 164 be now adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
To that motion, Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Yes, this has been a long journey for this issue, and I want to begin by thanking the folks who first brought me this and have worked so hard with me along the way. I will go over some of the provisions that we worked on in Conference Committee instead of going through the entire bill. First provision, the Innovative Clean Technology section that was in the House bill and that was not in the Senate bill is out and is no longer in the bill. The goal of the bill to reach 2.5% efficiencies over time, again, this is not a mandate, this is a goal. That was a House provision that is in the bill. In the Senate, we adopted some language in conference or in committee Senator Matthews brought forward to address that any fuel switching would be required to lower emissions, to make that fundamentally clear in the bill. It is moved from where we put it in committee, but it is still in the bill. We felt it did not belong in the definition, but we moved it into the section around implementing fuel switching. So that is still in the bill. The next provision the Senate had was the spending cap for all of the utilities around fuel switching. We remain at 0.35% for the IOUs. We did increase the COUs 0.05%, so their spending cap is now 0.55%. There's no delay on the start, which we had for the IOUs in the Senate, but there still is the 5-year sunset, which we had in the Senate. We also agreed to an increase in the low-income spend. We actually increased it more than what was in either of the bills, but all of the utilities that this applies to have agreed, and they can make it work. And the last provision that was in the Senate, we retained language to make sure that large energy consumers who are currently exempt from the SIP program will remain exempt without having to file any new paperwork. A couple of things, members, to remember that this has been reform that is needed. We have worked on it for a long time. Many have thought that this bill will raise rates. I disagree with that. If they meet their energy efficiencies, this does away with the mandated spend that is currently in law. I know that much of the discussion has been around propane. Members, that is a very, very small piece of this bill. The reform is so much bigger than that, is reform that our electric utilities need, and I believe that we have the protections in the bill around emission standards and affordability that gives propane the protection that they need. And also, members, every one of the 6 conference committee members signed this report, and I would ask for a green vote and support on this bill. Thank you.
Discussion on the Rarick motion. Senator Frentz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you, Senator Rarick. I rise in support of the motion. Members, this has been around a while, but the gist of it is this. We have a broad coalition of Minnesota groups that want us to pass this bill. Does it address every environmental concern in the state? No, it doesn't. But the things that it does do are very valuable. Among them, modernizes the SIP program. Advocates will tell you that the SIP program has already saved Minnesota ratepayers $6 billion and created tens of thousands of jobs. We want to move forward on the efficiency. To Senator Rarick's point, the fuel switching has some limitations on it. I think it proves that it was worth getting it to conference committee, even though I may not love that particular part of the bill. But finally, Mr. President, the low-income spend. We should be fighting for every Minnesotan. And the low-income spend increases in this bill are something that every member on both sides of the aisle should be proud of. We're doing this for Minnesotans who need energy efficiency and who can't afford it. That by itself is worth doing. And therefore, members, I'd ask your support for the motion. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the adoption of the conference committee report. Senator Kiffmeyer, followed by Senator Dibble. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President and members. Well, members, I appreciate the things that are here today before us, but members, once again, my concern is for propane, and it's been described as just a small portion of this bill. To these people, it's 100% of their livelihood, and they're all throughout the state of Minnesota. So I'm just hoping that things that have been said here today turn out to be true, but the real test of that will be as the years go by and we find out. But I do want to speak up to the value in the matter, that it is small, and yet when attempts to remove it, since it is that way, that have been refused. And so it's a little bit baffling for the propane folks to kind of understand that. But nevertheless, I understand this bill is going to pass today, but I think it's very important to recognize that the issue before us is that to some it is small, to others it is 100%, and it matters to them a great deal, and they deserve to be respected in their concerns that I bring forward before you today. And with that, Mr. President, thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. Senator Dibble, followed by Senator Osmick. Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of House File 164 as well, and would agree with the characterization of my good colleague, my fine colleague, Senator Frentz, that this is a good bill, not a great bill. I would also mention a positive addition that I think Senator Rarick might have jumped over, which was the IOU's energy savings goal has been moved up to 1.75%. And I was especially pleased to see the 2.5% energy savings goal that's stated as a matter of state policy. I wish it was actually more tangibly attached to the efforts of the IOUs, particularly on the electric side. But it's a start, and we know that they're already doing approximately that level of effort already, which is saving ratepayers literally billions and billions of dollars. I think it is regrettable that efficient fuel switching is limited to the degree that it is. I think that tells us we have more work to do in the future. I'm extremely happy, though, to see that we're moving up the efforts that we are going to undertake on behalf of low-income individuals. That will make a huge difference in the lives of those people in terms of both the comfort and the health of where they live and their housing, as well as their ability to save significant dollars on their utility bill. I would hesitate to encourage anyone to take a huge victory lap on what we've done on energy and climate. This is definitely an advance and a step forward and sets a really great framework. You know, putting fuel switching into the conservation efficiency programs is a tremendous step forward. But we have a lot to do, members. This isn't clean energy first. This isn't 100% like we have still being debated in the conference committee, in a different conference committee. But it is a good step forward, and I encourage a green vote. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion on the motion. Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Senator Rarick yield for a couple of questions?
Senator Rarick will yield. Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess my microphone is revolting on me. It's been a year since I've used it. So, Senator Rarick, there's been a lot of commentary regarding propane, and it was also brought up just within the last few minutes on the Senate floor. And I'm going to paint you a scenario because I want to dispel some myths. I think there's a show called Mythbusters. And I'm going to dispel some myths today because I heard the original debate on the floor, and there were some myths perpetuated, and I just want to dispel a few of those. So, Senator Rarick, my first question to you is on the actual spending. If, for example, Wright-Hennepin, who is in my district, they're an energy producer. Senator Anderson has many of those constituents in his district. If Wright-Hennepin, which is a muni co-op, spent $1 million every year, let's just say $1 million next year, and they spent that to switch people from propane furnaces to electric furnaces, how much of that fuel switching would actually be applied to their SIP requirements that is in state statute today or after this bill passes? How much credit would they get to switch from propane to electric?
Senator Rarick.
Mr. President and Senator Osmek, as the bill is written, they would not be able to count any of that under their SIP program because the way it is written, that would not lower emissions, it would not be cost effective, and thus it could not be counted.
Senator Osmek.
Well, thank you, Senator Rarick. And because I've worked on this for a number of years, I know that. I've known that from the beginning, that the argument and the fear that this somehow incentivizes switching from propane to electric. If you look, members, if you look at propane's talking points as far as why propane makes sense in Minnesota, they claim on their own website they are more environmentally sound, they're cleaner than electric, and also they are cheaper than electric. And just based upon those two measurements, any money that any muni co-op IOU would spend does not apply to the SIP program, does not apply to the measurement that we have in state statute. So it really bothers me when people say they're all worried about suddenly everybody tearing out their propane furnaces and putting in electric furnaces. It's not true, because you could do that. Xcel Energy could put $5 billion into changing people from natural gas or from propane to electric. Ain't going to apply to their SIP program. Isn't going to apply to that measurement. They could do it today, but it doesn't apply. So, Senator Rarick, another question for you. Another comment that was made
Senator Rarick will yield. Senator Osmek.
Thank you, Mr. President. There were comments made previously about carve-outs, that there have been carve-outs within the muni co-op, the legislation dealing with muni co-ops for perhaps delivery of energy and those type of things. How many carve-outs does propane have under SIP statute language right now?
Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Osmek, right now SIP provisions do not apply to the propane industry at all. So I would say there are no carve-outs for the propane industry because they do not have to follow any of the mandates.
Senator Osmek.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Rarick. Which is my point, members. If propane really wants to be part of SIP, and Senator Marty's not on the floor, neither is Senator Dibble. I've had them on my committee before. I'm more than happy next year to propose legislation and sign on to it to make propane have to sell less product. Because under this bill, or under the language of SIP, you have to reduce the sales of what you are doing. I'm sure propane would be thrilled with having to reduce the amount of propane they have to sell by 2.5% every year. I'm sure they would be just thrilled about that. But the fact of the matter is, propane is not under the same. We hear about the quotation about level playing field. Level playing field, we tell Xcel Energy and now muni co-ops that they have to sell less product. That makes no sense. You want to come to argue about whether SIP should even be in statutory language and telling businesses they should sell less of their product? I'll give you that one. That'd be a great discussion to have. But the bottom line is, we're telling our energy producers to sell less product. So I appreciate the comments that Senator Dibble made. I have become a little bit more interested in energy conservation, and I've gone to conferences with conservation as a tool and as a part of the energy grid. But there does come a point where you can only go to a certain point. Conservation and changing from incandescent to fluorescent to LED light bulbs only will save you a certain amount of energy at some point in time. You cannot, the law of diminishing returns eventually catches up with you, that to continue to conserve, you become much, much more expensive as you get closer to 100%, so to speak. So there is actually good common sense that comes with conservation. It's cost avoidance. By avoiding building a new generating facility, I'm sure people don't want to hear coal being one of the options, but it still may have to be an option. We need to have multiple, I've said before, we need to have a diverse portfolio: nuclear, solar, wind, coal, natural gas. We need to have a diverse portfolio unless you want to be cold in the winter and really hot in the summer. It needs to be there. But members, avoiding having to build more facilities does save the ratepayers money. That conservation, not having to build that extra power plant, or better yet, not having to build more wind turbines or put up more solar, that does save us money because those structures cost money. And another concern that we don't talk about is transmission. That if we have to put this up, if we have to build a new facility, or better yet, put up more wind generation, and maybe Senator Westrum's district, that transmission, you're going to have to build more transmission. We know in committee last year or the year before, we know based upon MISO, that's the interconnect grid that we're currently in, that as you approach 40% renewables on the grid, you create a transmission issue, and it's not a small one. It's billions of dollars. So avoiding having to create additional generation someplace within the grid, again, saves us money, and it saves us not just on the building of the facilities, but also the transmission of the energy back into primarily the metropolitan area, because that's where 60-70% of us live. So I'm happy to have signed the committee report. It's not perfect. I didn't like going from 1.5 to 2.5, but there are provisions that the House had which were much, much more onerous. I think this is a good compromise. I thank Senator Rarick for including me on his conference committee, and I do suggest a green vote. Thank you.
Senator Rarick renews his motion to adopt the conference committee report on House File 164. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 164, a bill for an act relating to energy.
Third reading. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to remind members, before we take a roll call vote on this bill, of Rule 40.2, and that is that a member may vote on a question only at the member's own seat in the Senate chamber. Senate tradition has also indicated that you may not be at someone else's desk, standing in the hallway, standing in the aisles, talking to them, where presumably, although you are not lobbying them, the optics are not very good in that regard. You need to be at your own desk voting, and then when the vote is announced, you may then get up and speak to others. Or, of course, if you want to vote, like we did during the pandemic rules, which in a way are still operating, you can vote and leave the chamber. But you may not go up to another member and carry on a conversation during the roll call, which, of course, also leads to all the noise during that particular time. So please abide by Rule 40.2. Be at your desk, vote, and wait for the vote to be announced. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Rest, thank you for the reminder. Advice well taken. Final discussion on the conference committee report for House File 164. Seeing none, the Secretary will. Senator Rarick, any final comments? The Secretary will take the roll. All members in alternate locations, please come to the chamber to vote. Call on Senator Frentz to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Members Senator Rest just reminded the body that we are to vote at our desk and not carry on conversations under a roll call vote unless those conversations are outside the chamber. Senator Frentz, those voting under Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. And just for the record, I tried to already report Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Champion votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
And Senator Torres Ray votes aye.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Newman votes aye.
Newman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Chamberlain votes aye.
Chamberlain votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Senjum votes aye.
Senjum votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes no.
Ingebrigtsen votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Matthews votes no.
Matthews votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Curran votes no.
Curran votes no. Senator Jasinski.
Absentees?
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Abler votes aye.
Abler votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 58 ayes and 9 nays, the bill is passed and title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions will revert to the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce the passage by the House of the following Senate file herewith returned. Senate file number 519, a bill for an act relating to corrections. Patrick D. Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
There's no action required on that message. Remaining under motions and resolutions, the Secretary will read an author's motion.
Senator Klein moves that his name be stricken as chief author, shown as co-author, and the name of Senator Duckworth be added as chief author to Senate File 2471. Senator Howe moves that the name of Senator Westrom be added as co-author to Senate File number 2559. Senator Benson moves that the name of Senator Hoffman be added as co-author to Senate File number 2563.
Discussion on the author's motions read by the Secretary. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions, the Secretary will introduce a resolution.
Senator Osmick introduces Senate Resolution number 67, congratulating David Gesh as being named Middle School Teacher of the Year.
Senate Resolution number 67 will be referred to the Committee on Rules and Administration. Remaining under motions and resolutions, Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pursuant to Rule 26, I designate the following bills to be made special orders for immediate consideration. Members, the list is on your desk.
Members, the bill up for consideration is number 99 on general orders, House File 2360, Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to move that the amendment made to House File number 2360 by the Committee of Rules and Administration in the report adopted May 16, 2021, pursuant to Rule 45, be stricken.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the opportunity to present House File 2360, The bill was introduced in the Senate in March as Senate File 2269, but as it moved through the House of Representatives, the bill on the floor was met with an objection to one of the claimants, and it was referred to the Ways and Means Committee, and in so doing, the House, the Ways and Means Committee pared down the bill from the number of claims that we had agreed to in the claims hearing on April 7th of this year. And so before you, members, we have two claims. One was an exoneration claim for Mr. Nicholas Mark Peterson, who was pled guilty and convicted of a possession of a firearm by an ineligible person. And the Minnesota Supreme Court held in another case that the BB gun that Mr. Peterson possessed was not a firearm for purposes of the statute that he was convicted under, and therefore the claimant conviction was dismissed, vacated, and so we have before us $108,684.65 to pay to Mr. Mark Peterson for his incarceration several years ago. We also have three claims that the DOC can pay if it's less than $7,000. The claim for those three claims amount of money is $1,180.63. And so we've pared the bill down to $109,865.28. And basically that is the bill, Mr. President.
Discussion on House File 2360. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2360, a bill for an act relating to claims against the state.
Third reading. Final discussion on the bill. Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Of just opportunity to say, please vote green.
Members, we're on final passage of House File 2360. See no further discussion. The Secretary will take the roll. All members in alternate locations, please come to the chamber to vote. Call on Senator Jasinski to report the votes of the members voting under Rule 40.7. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Coleman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Goggin votes aye.
Goggin votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Newman votes aye.
Newman votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Chamberlain votes aye.
Chamberlain votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Senjum votes aye.
Senjum votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Ingebrigtsen votes aye.
Ingebrigtsen votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Senator Matthews votes aye.
Matthews votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Curran votes aye.
Curran votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Carlson votes aye.
Carlson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eaton votes aye.
Eaton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Eakin votes aye.
Eakin votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Isaacson votes aye.
Isaacson votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Latz votes aye.
Latz votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Newton votes aye.
Newton votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Senator Torres Ray votes aye.
Torres Ray votes aye. Senator Frentz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Latz changes his vote from yes to no.
Senator Latz changes his vote from yes to no.
Thank you.
Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. I report Senator Rosen votes aye.
Rosen votes aye. All members having voted who have the desire to vote, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 63 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we'll take up the confirmation calendar. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. The motion I'm about to make is one I know everyone is waiting for every year. I move that the appointment of notary publics received May 13th, 2021 be taken from the table.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. Senator Limmer.
And I move that the Senate do now consent to and confirm the appointments of the notaries public.
To that motion, Senator Limmer.
Well, Mr. President, this may at times seem like a trivial request, but it's vitally important for the people that want their notary public license to be extended. And we do this often. Actually, we do it every year. And those individuals help us transact a great number of business across the state of Minnesota. They witness documents, they witness contracts of our people, and quite often it prevents our people coming back and getting involved in even more government hassle. And so it's a streamlining effect that formalizes signatures and making sure that the right people are doing the right business on those individual contracts and documents. I urge your support.
Discussion on the Limmer motion. Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion prevails and the appointments are confirmed. Senator Gazelka.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, we're going to recess until we receive 2 House files that they're working on right now. We'll give a 15-minute warning before we come back on the floor. GOP members, we're going to caucus immediately in 1200 or on Zoom. We just have a few more items to talk about. And so with that, Mr. President, I move we recess to the call of the President.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Minority Caucus will caucus via Zoom. Watch your email.
Senator Gazelka renews his motion that the Senate recess to the call of the President. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed say no. Motion prevails. The Senate is in recess.